Thank you so much for joining me today on Just Praise Him Radio. I'm your host, Glynda Lomax, and my job is to inspire you to a closer walk with Christ. Now here's the show. Hello, believers. Welcome to the Just Praise Him radio program. I'm your host, Glynda Lomax, and in this episode, we're going to talk about how God answers prayers. I don't remember how many of these stories I have shared before, but I'm going to share some stories that all happened to me before 2004, times when God answered prayers for me in big ways. I think it's very important that we get our faith built up and keep our faith very strong, especially here in America in light of everything that's been going on. Because we all know that war is coming. We don't know where it's coming from. We don't know when it's going to show up, but we know it's coming. And it will help you if you have faith in God and you can rest in Him and not be freaked out, okay? Because war is probably going to freak us all out a little bit at first, but then we can find our peace in Him. In Daniel chapter 9, from verse 3, Daniel is seen repenting before God and praying for an answer. In verse 21, the angel Gabriel shows up bringing the answer to his prayer straight from heaven. Again, in chapter 10, verse 12, Daniel receives an answer to prayer when an angel appears to him and says, "Fear not, for from the first day thou didst set thine heart to understand and to chasten thyself before thy God. Thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words." One of the most important lessons to learn about getting our prayers answered is that with our words, we invite blessings and answers to our prayers, or we send them on disappointed angel wings back to heaven's storehouse. And I have seen this in a vision, y'all. God gave me a vision one time many, many years ago when my mother was still alive. And He showed me her sitting in her chair that she always sat in, and she was believing for something, and she had her faith up, and she was excited. And then He showed me her getting discouraged and speaking something out of her mouth that negated what she was believing for. And during the time that she was believing, I had seen these angels come down this staircase, and they were carrying these bags that were tied with gold bands, and I knew that there were blessings in those bags, and they were bringing them to her. And when she spoke something that negated her blessings, I saw that their heads just dropped in disappointment, and they turned around and started going back up the stairs, carrying her blessings with them. That's how powerful our words are. And it's hard to remember, especially when things are going badly or when chaos is around us. It's hard to remember how powerful our words really are. And that's why we need to start now, and we need to start working on these kind of things like what we speak and what, building our faith up and that kind of thing. So then you're not only ready for if war hits your land, you're ready for anything. You're ready for the doctor giving you a bad report. You're ready for the child that acts like they lost their mind and they got on drugs. You're ready for anything if you have strong faith in God in a relationship with Him. Your words can help God bless you, or they can prevent Him from blessing you. You choose each time you open your mouth which one it's going to be. It's clear from both of these passages in Daniel that God cares about our prayers. The Holy Spirit told me once when I received something I'd prayed for 2 years prior that He doesn't ever forget a prayer. I had forgotten that I prayed for it, but He didn't. We may not see His answer right away, but that does not mean He did not hear us. Just sometimes God speaks to someone to do something and they don't obey, and so He has to go to the next person or the next person. There was a story in, I believe it was Spirit-Led Woman, back in the late 90s or maybe around 2000. I can't remember exactly when. It's no longer in print, unfortunately. And this man told the story, and he was a very busy preacher with a big congregation, and he had a lot of work on his plate. And God spoke to him and asked him if he would put out a flyer of the gospel and distribute it to every household in the nation of America that Easter weekend. And he was like, "Lord, why are you asking me this? Because I'm so busy already." And the Lord spoke to him, and he said, I asked, I think he said 6 other people, but they all said no. How do you tell the Most High God no? I'm just not even going to go into that, but y'all think about that. we have the right to tell him no, but it's not something I would recommend. My first really vivid experience with answered prayer came about a month into my walk with God. A month, y'all. Back in the summer of 1996, I was working on a seismograph crew in Oklahoma, and I wanted to leave the company and go contract so I would have more control over which jobs I worked, and which I did not. And I wanted to make more money, of course. One day, God sent me a message to me through a dear friend that he was about to take me out of my job on the crew and not to be afraid that where he guides, he provides. So that night, I think I was in Chickasha, Oklahoma when he did this. That night, I was by myself in my apartment, and I challenged him, and I said, okay, if you're going to take me out of my job on the crew, I'm going to need something to drive, and I'm going to need another job. And since you're God, this should be no problem for you, right? And I literally talked to him like this, y'all, because I was like, okay, he's God, he can handle this, right? So I said, I want a dark blue extended cab pickup, preferably a GMC or a Chevy. I'll take a Dodge, but please don't send me a Ford. At that time, I did not like Fords. And while you're at it, when you send me that next job, I want to make twice as much money as I do right now. And I figured if he really was God, he should be able to pull that off without any problem. And I knew I couldn't do it. I didn't have the credit or income to buy a truck like that, and I didn't know anybody who would hire me and pay me over $60,000 a year to do the same job I was doing. So if it happened, it would have to be him. And not desiring to spend another winter in the icy plains of western Kansas, which was part of the reason I wanted to leave that crew, because we went there every winter, and every winter we all threatened to quit our job. So I told God I wanted to go south, preferably to Louisiana, because I'd never permitted down there. About a week later, I got a phone call from a friend of a friend that I'd spoken with and told him that I was kind of looking at going contract. And he said that they were looking for a contract permit agent with a minimum of 2 years experience on a crew, and I had exactly 2 years experience on a ground crew. He offered me a set amount per day. You get, when you do that work, you usually get a day rate and per diem, and they pay your lodging. And I asked God in my heart, I was like, Lord, is this it? But he didn't answer me. So I told him, I said, well, can I take some time to think about this and I'll get back with you? He said, sure. So the same man called me again a week later, and he increased the day rate they were offering me by $25 a day. And immediately, I didn't even ask, and God spoke, and he said, take it. And so I took it, and I agreed to begin work 2 weeks later because I wanted to give 2 weeks' notice. In all, including expense money, the new position actually paid 2.5 times what I was currently earning. And my first job was in Lafayette, Louisiana. It was as if God was saying to me, I can do everything you asked for and more. So I was so excited. And I called an auto dealership down in Elk City that I had bought a pre-owned truck from before. And I told my salesman down there, I said, hey, I'm looking for a dark blue extended cab GMC pickup. And I want a new one. And the salesman told me they didn't have any, but they had a single cab black pickup. And I said, will you call me if you get my truck in? I'm not looking for a single cab black truck. 3 days later, he called me, and they had gotten in a dark blue extended cab GMC Sierra. And I said, that's my truck. He said, don't you want to test drive it? And I said, nope, that's my truck. I said, will you start the financing process for me? I asked him, how much I needed down and all that, and he told me. And he said, okay, well, I'll submit your credit. 2 days later, he called me again, and he said, I've run your credit through 7 different lenders, and nobody wants to loan you that much money because you never borrowed that much money at one time before. And I said, run it through 7 more because somebody's going to approve. Somebody's going to loan me that money. I know that's my truck. And I'm sure he thought I was just wacko. But the next day, he called me again, and he said, Bank of America has agreed to loan you the money. And all I had to do was come down and put the down payment down and sign the papers, and I could drive off in my new truck. And I did. Even in the toughest times, God has been faithful to make sure that I had the money to make every payment on that truck. Even on real hard times, y'all, when I was out of work and everything, he made sure I had the money to pay that truck. One time during a really, really hard time when I was out of work and out of everything, I was praying frantically and begging about my truck payment, and God spoke to me, and he said, I gave you that truck. He said, I'm not going to let you lose it. And I was like, oh, thank God. After that, I never worried again. I never worried again after that. So later, it was wintry cold one Friday in December in Dallas, Texas. And I ran out to my pickup and jumped in, and I only had a jacket for protection against the biting north wind because when I went to Dallas, when God sent me to Dallas to stay with my dad for a while who was dying of lung cancer, I thought I was going back out into the oil field, and all I had was oil field clothes, which were jeans and boots and blazers, so that's what I took with me. I didn't have anything else, so I didn't have a coat. I had a jacket that you wear with jeans and boots is what I had. They call them rancher's jackets. So I remember still to this day, I remember that how cold and biting that wind was because my clothes were thin. I had bought office clothes. I had a charge card that had like, I don't know, $100, $150 left on it. And I had gone to hit the clearance sales at the end of summer to try to get some kind of office clothes because once God showed me I was staying there, I had to have something to wear. They don't let you work in offices in jeans in Dallas. They'll send you home. So that cold north wind was blowing right through my clothes and I was freezing. And I sat just shivering there in the truck, warming the truck up. And I said, Lord, will you help me get a winter coat? All I had was that rancher's jacket. I didn't have anything that was suitable to wear to work or to church over dresses. And at the time, I was living in an extended stay motel, paying by the week and barely scraping by. Almost every week, I ate lunch and dinner both on $20 total for the whole week. You don't eat real good like that, y'all. For the $20 for 7 days is not even $3 a day. I remember those days. I remember digging pennies out of my car seat trying to pay for a $1 burger at a place that had a $1 burger. There just wasn't any more money for food unless I gave up tithing, and I refused to do that because I had seen tithing provide for my mother for years when she had nothing else but God, and I was not going to give it up. So I asked God to show me where was a coat that I could afford. Maybe at I knew where there was a Goodwill. I said, Lord, maybe at the Goodwill there could be one for like $3 or $4 or something like that, or some other secondhand place so I don't freeze to death. Something that I would have enough money to buy. And as I stood in line at the grocery store that evening, this lady that was in front of me was wearing this beautiful trench coat with epaulette trimming on the shoulders and a sash belt. And I said, Lord, I love that style of coat. I said, I would love to have one like that in a bright colored wool. That would be so warm. I was tired of just basic navy blue and black and dark brown. That's all I had. I wanted something bright and pretty. And most of all, I wanted to be warm. I was so cold all the time. The next day was Sunday, and I got up early and got ready for church. At the time, I was riding to South Dallas every Sunday to attend the early service at the Potter's house where T.D. Jakes is pastor. The teaching was very anointed, and I never left feeling I had not received something. It was cold in my friend's car, and especially hard to keep my legs warm because I was wearing a lightweight dress and had nothing to cover my legs with as the car slowly warmed up in the icy temperature. Thank you, Jesus, that car never broke down. On the ride home, my friend turned to me suddenly, and she said, do you by any chance need a coat? And obviously, my rancher's jacket was not a great fashion statement over my dress. And I said, yes. And she said, I think I have an extra one that will fit you, and I've only worn it about 6 times. And she said, I'll show it to you when we get back to my house. I was so glad that I could maybe get a coat. It looked like God had heard my prayers. When we walked in, because she told me, she said, I don't want to offend you, but do you need a coat? I said, I'm not offended. I'm cold. I said, yes, I need a coat. And she was kind of laughing. I said, I need a coat. When we walked into her home, she went straight to the closet and pulled out a plastic-covered garment. When what she unveiled left my mouth hanging open. It was a full-length, bright red wool coat from Lord & Taylor's, and it had epaulette trim on the shoulders and a sash belt. It was exactly what I had prayed for. Exactly. God answered my prayer. May God bless my friend Noni. I don't know where she is now, but may He bless her forever for her kindness and generosity to me. And I wore that coat for many years. I don't have it anymore. I wish I did. I'd still be wearing it. But every time I would put it on, I would think of my Father's love for me. And I would think of how He had mercy on me in that cold winter when I didn't have enough money to buy anything like that. He is so faithful to provide for everything that I needed after sending me to Dallas. And I was scared to death to go to Dallas. I remember 3 months after I got to Dallas, and I was working for Bank of America as a temp, and I remember looking down and my knees were shaking. My knees were knocking. I didn't know that was a real thing. But I wasn't even thinking about a lot of stuff. I was just scared all the time because I had never lived in a big city alone before, and I was terrified. And I had no money. I had no money. All my charge cards were maxed out. I had nothing, so I had God, though. So, the following spring, in April 1999, I began looking for an apartment in Dallas to get out of the extended stay. I looked at a bunch of apartments that were nice, but they didn't have that feeling. I knew they weren't the one. I didn't feel the peace from any of them that I knew I would feel when I found where God wanted me. Finally, one of my coworkers took me 45 minutes from my job to North Dallas to an older complex where she said she had lived for 8 years. As soon as I stepped out of her car, I knew I was home. Just one apartment was available in the size I wanted. I took an application back to work with me. They required a $200 deposit plus an application fee of $35 just to apply for an apartment in the complex. I could scrape up the $35, but there was no way I could get $200. I had no place to get it. I told nobody about not having the money for the deposit or needing that. I knew if it was God, He would somehow provide everything I needed, or else He would make the need go away. So I prayed and I said, okay, Lord, if this is really where you want me to rent, then I need you to bring me the deposit money because, I've got no place to get it from. So then I kind of waited. I kept looking, at ads for other apartments, but I knew that was the one where I was supposed to be. And in addition to that, it was called Royal Arms. Now, you can't get more God than that. So that Sunday morning after church, I was walking through the parking lot with 2 friends, and one friend turned to me and handed me an envelope and said, do not open this until you get home. Not knowing what was inside, but curious, I said, did God tell you to give that to me? And he said, yes. And he walked off to his car, and I was like, okay. I opened the envelope as soon as my friend pulled onto the highway. I did not wait till I got home. Inside was a check made out to me for exactly $200. God had brought me the deposit. Just after Christmas in December 2000, a friend of mine from Oklahoma came to stay a few days with me at that apartment, at Royal Arms. Just before New Year's, I drove her back to Oklahoma. The night we arrived there, a terrible snowstorm hit, and I was snowed in. I guess I didn't watch the weather back then. The second day, I was able to leave and made it as far as Oklahoma City before my truck got stuck on I-35, and I was forced to have it towed to the nearest hotel or motel and wait out the storm. Many travelers were killed in the next few days as I watched the news from my motel room and waited for it to thaw. I was frantic. The towing charge to get my truck off the highway and the motel and the food were coming out of my rent money, and my rent was due already. It was due on the 1st. Trying desperately to conserve every penny of my rent I could, I only ate 1 meal a day, and the only phone call I made was to my then friend John Morgan because we worked for the same realtor. And I said, can you tell them I stand in Oklahoma City, and I can't be making phone calls. And he said, sure. So he told him. I prayed for warmer weather and asked God to send more rent money and send it soon, Lord, because I'm in Dallas. If you don't pay, they just boot you to the curb. They say bye. The evening I arrived back in Dallas, I think I was snowed in there for 3 or 4 days. The evening I arrived back in Dallas, my boss called to tell me she had just cleaned out my desk and was releasing me from my duties. Apparently, it was far more important to her that I not inconvenience her for those days than that I risk my life and try to come back earlier. She would have preferred I risk my life. And on that note, if you are working at a job where you have a boss who expects you to risk life or limb to do what they want you to do, get away from there because the devil will use that against you. He will use it to maim you or kill you. It's not worth it. No job is worth your life. She said that she had friends who had come through Oklahoma City and made it back to Dallas much sooner, and she did not believe I was unable to drive back earlier. So she basically called me a liar. And as I hung up the phone, God spoke to me and he said, do not fear, this is my hand. And I said, okay, Lord, I need rent money though. 20 minutes later, my phone rang, and it was a friend I had worked with at Bank of America who had never ever called me at home. And she asked how I was doing, and I told her I'd just been fired from my job. I said, well, as a matter of fact. And she told me to meet her 30 minutes later. And she told me where to meet her at. And that God had instructed her to give me a check for my rent. She didn't even ask how much it was. And she gave me the location to meet her. She even handed me an extra $20 bill just to be sure that I had gas money. Now that's somebody who hears from God, y'all. So let me tell you, for anybody who don't know, God knows exactly how much your bills are. I'm talking to somebody. God knows how much your bills are, woman of God. And he ain't broke. He's got people all over the place that he can just say the word to, and they will give you money. And your bills will be paid, okay? Do you have enough faith to believe him for that? Here's the hard part about believing for God to pay your bills. You can see the bills, they're coming in the mail all the time, right? Big pink notices, hot pink that says, cut off notice and whatever. You can see the bills, but you cannot for the life of you see where he could possibly bring you money from. But you know what? God loves to surprise you. And he has surprised me at different times and brought me money through people I would have never guessed would have given money. People that I didn't think had any money to give and other things. He will get the money to you. You don't need to worry about the details. You just need to worry about whether you have enough faith to believe him for that. And here's another thing. When the famine comes, or if you are in severe lack at any time, it works the same way with food, okay? It works the same way with food. You don't have to know where the food's coming from. He does. Do you think the children of Israel knew where the food was coming from when they were in the desert and he rained down manna on them? They couldn't see any food anywhere around them. They were out there with just a bunch of dirt and hot sun. So he rained it down from heaven. So I'm just saying, this is why I want y'all to build your faith up now. While everything's relatively calm, relatively normal. It won't ever be completely normal again, but, relatively speaking, it's fairly calm, fairly normal. Build your faith now, because when chaos hits, you can't build your faith because your spirit is too upset. I'm just saying. God knows exactly how much your bills are. He knows when they are due, and he knows how important it is to you that they are paid every month. Don't ever think he don't care, because he cares more than you will ever be able to comprehend. He cares enough that he has numbered every hair on your head and tattooed your picture in the palm of his hand. He chose you long ago, before the foundations of the world, and he called you to himself. That's why you accepted him and believed in him. And he listens every time you speak to him, and he records every prayer, every praise, every time you speak about him to somebody else. He cares, and he loves you. And y'all, I never got fired from jobs. I never got fired. I was so shocked. The following month, after I got fired, I still had no job, but I was helping a friend part-time. The friend that I was helping was actually the friend who had given me the rent money. And this will sound totally counterintuitive, but God had spoken to me and said, I want you to go help her with her business. Plant that as a seed. So I had been driving into Dallas and helping her every evening that I possibly could to build her business, but not getting paid for it. God told me to help her for free, so I was helping her for free. Because that's who he showed me to help. When the first of the month arrived, I fought the temptation to become fearful and let the situation overwhelm me. And I was listening to this one preaching couple on TV, and they were talking about the 100-fold return. And I thought, what have I got to lose? I didn't have enough to pay my rent, but I had enough to plant a seed. So I told God, I said, okay, I'm going to plant a seed of $12 because I added up all my bills and I needed $1,200 to pay all my bills, to pay my rent and then pay my utilities that were due. I said, Lord, I need money and I have no other avenue to get it. So I'm going to do this 100-fold thing. I'm going to plant the seed. You tell me where to plant it. And he did. And it was to that couple, their ministry, because I had just received food out of that storehouse. See? And I said, I'm just going to believe you to bring me a 100-fold return because I don't have any place else to go to get this. My family was poor, y'all. There was nobody to even go to and borrow money. And I don't like to borrow money anyway because then you're in debt. And I don't like that. Okay, so I told nobody that I needed that money. I didn't tell anybody that I didn't have money to pay my upcoming rent. I didn't do any of that. I wrote my check. I prayed over it. I praised God over it. And I drove to the post office, dropped it in the mailbox, and pulled out on the freeway to go to my friend's office. Because I was helping her. She had helped me, and God just showed me in my spirit, hey, go help her. Because I have a niche for marketing. I love to do marketing work. And she needed somebody to help her with marketing to build her business. And by the way, if I never told y'all this, or if you never heard this before, my friend who obeyed God and gave me a check to pay my rent, God made her a millionaire in less than 2 years. I cannot make this up, y'all. He made her a millionaire. She was driving a silver Mercedes. He made her a millionaire in less than 2 years because she obeyed him. Because he's still getting glory from that. And that was back in like 2000 or something. 25 years later, I'm still telling this story. Think about that. Next time God asks you to do something that's a sacrifice, he's not trying to get something from you. He's trying to get something to you. Okay. So anyway, I drove to my friend's office, and that evening, after working for most of the day, my friend called me into her office, and she had her checkbook out. And she wrote out a check, and she handed it to me. And again, she said God had instructed her to give me a certain amount. The check was made out for exactly $1,200. Nobody is going to ever convince me that was not God, because I didn't tell anybody else how much money I needed. I didn't tell anybody that I was in need, that I didn't have money to pay my rent, nothing. That was all between me and God. And he spoke to her, and she wrote that check. See why he made her a millionaire? She knows what to do with money. A lot of people ask God for money, and they don't have any idea what to do with it. So he gives it to somebody that does. He had answered my prayer. That was the same day I dropped the envelope in the mail, y'all. It was the same day that I went to the post office. I remember driving. I still remember it right now. I'm sitting there in my truck by that blue mailbox going, am I really going to do this? I'm going to put because I want to say I had like $60. And my son and I were sharing that apartment, and I had to buy food for both of us, and I had to pay whatever I could on the utility, and there was nothing coming in. There was nothing. I had no unemployment. I had nothing. There was nothing coming in. When you work contract, if you don't set your stuff up right, then if you run out of work, you don't have no unemployment. So I'm like, am I really going to do this? But I did it because I had nothing else to stand on but God's promise. So I stood on it, and guess what? It worked. He answered my prayer. So a few months later, I had started to clean houses to make money because I had to get some money coming in, and there were no jobs. This was during the Silicon Prairie bust, if I remember right, and there were no jobs. People were standing out in the road begging, literally begging on corners. I remember seeing people who had been working in offices months earlier standing on street corners begging, saying, please help, I'm losing my house, whatever. Need money for food. It was a very, very sad time. People just didn't have any money. So I started thinking about cleaning houses, and I was cleaning my hairdresser's house in exchange for her doing my hair, because I didn't have the money to have my hair done otherwise. And so I was doing her house, and I said, I was thinking about picking up some other houses to clean. Do you happen to know anybody that might? She said, girl, I'll put the word out. She put the word out, and I picked up, I don't remember how many houses I picked up, but I had to say, stop, don't tell anybody else. And I remember I was cleaning, because these were mansions. And I remember I was down on the floor, dusting the table legs on a kitchen table at this one really beautiful mansion that I cleaned. And this lady's friends came over, and she walked out of the room to go get her purse or something. They were going somewhere. And her friend walked over to me and slipped me a card. She goes, call me. I looked at her. I said, for this? And she said, yeah. I said, I can't take any more people on. I'm booked solid. She looked so disappointed. I said, I'm sorry, because I can't remember how many days a week I cleaned, but I had more than I could handle. There's lots of work cleaning houses in places like Dallas, and they got a lot of houses to clean in Dallas. But so I cleaned houses for a while, and I didn't have no shame about that at all. I liked doing it. I liked cleaning things and making them clean. But I'm going to cut this off here now because I don't want to start another story. What I'm reading you is something I wrote back in, what year was that? 2003. I used to write a newsletter, and I had written all these miracle provision stories up. And I've probably told y'all some of them before, but even if I have, it's good to hear these again, because you need your faith built up for everything that's coming. Even if no war was coming to America, you need faith to get through everyday life. You never know when you're going to get a bad report from the doctor, or somebody in your family is, or there's going to be job loss or whatever. We all need to have strong faith. So I want to build y'all's faith up. It's easier to believe when you can remember stories like this. It helps build your faith. These are real stories that happened to me, and I wrote them back when I could still remember all the details. And I happened to come across a copy of this newsletter on one of my drives, and I was so excited to find it. I'm like, oh, yay, I can tell the stories, because I can't remember all these stories, and I can't remember all the details for sure. So I will read you the rest of the stories in the next episode. I hope this is a blessing to you. Jesus bless you. Thanks for listening. Y'all have a great week. Thank you so much for tuning in today to Just Praise Him Radio, sponsored by the friends and supporters of JPH. You can contact me by mail at my new address, Glynda Lomax, JPH Inc., P.O. Box 854, Altus, that's Altus, Oklahoma 73522, or by email at jphtoday@gmail.com. Don't forget to visit the website for prophetic updates at wingsofprophecy.blogspot.com. JPH is not affiliated with any nonprofit organization, church, or denomination.